We are talking about the title of this talk is Women from Muted to Movements. And we are talking about sexism and misogyny, and how that creeps up sometimes in faith movements. How can we as women who feel called, who feel a deep calling to preach and speak, how do we navigate around that? Female leadership, all of it. It's going to be hot. It's going to be hot, but it's going to be a great, great conversation. Very honest, very real, very raw, very authentic. My guest today, who'll be joining me in just a moment, is Katz. And she is from Long Beach, California. She is a CEO of Women Speaker Collective. And really her role is to empower and amplify women's voices. So I hope that you're ready for this conversation. She's also a co-pastor of Anthem Church in Long Beach, California. So she has lived a life of being a pastor, a female pastor, and what that looks like. How are you doing today?
Good. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you okay. It's so good to have you with me. Oh my goodness. Girl, we are going in tonight.
I am excited. Thanks for having me. It's so good to see you. I wish I was with you in person.
I know, but we the last time we connected, it was Chicago, was it not?
We were in Chicago, and that was quite an amazing time with the Women Speakers Collective boot camp, and got to know you a bit more.
It was. And now you are co-pastor of Anthem Church, Long Beach, California, with your husband. Tell me a little bit about your husband.
Yes. Well, we are complete opposites, and I'm pastor's kid, raised in the church from San Diego, California, and he is an ex-drug dealer from the streets of LA. So you could only imagine the dynamic in our home, but he's awesome. He's a businessman as well as a pastor, and we do life together. We work as a team, and it's pretty amazing.
I love it. I love it. I'm so glad to have you with me. And I love that we're going in. And you know what I have to say? You are like me. You're a soul sister like me. You are just a warrior. And I know I sent you the questions, and you didn't even shirk. You said, I love your questions.
I do love your questions. Yes. No fear here. Let's just dive right in.
Let's dive right in. That's right. Because that's what leaders do. We go ahead and we take those blows and carve a path and make it easier for the next generation, right?
That's absolutely right. And we don't have time. Like, we have to dive in. We have to face these questions head on. We have to ask the questions, the hard questions, because we got one chance. Like, this is it. Let's make it count. Let's advance forward. We can't shrink back.
And as you can see, I didn't do any warm up. We're going all the way there, honey.
Dive in the deep end.
All right. Autumn, I'd love to know, how has sexism impacted your life as an individual, as a co-pastor, a female pastor in the church community? I'd love for you to share any experiences that you've had, good and bad. Maybe we'll focus on the bad just to encourage some. And how did you navigate all of that?
Right. Such a great question. Well, I was, first of all, just blessed to be raised in a home where parents said, yes, you can speak. Yes, you can lead. I was put on the stage from a very young age. And so given some freedom there to explore my own voice, and to, just see what that would be like, to what message I had or how my voice should be used. And so I was blessed to have that. But, the older I get and the more that I, go in different places of speaking and influence, you run into all kinds of things. And so I'm thinking of a few stories. One of them, I was with my good friend Danielle Strickland, and we were traveling to a conference, and I step into this room, and it was a pastors and leaders conference where I think, women are going to be there. It's going to be awesome. Step into this room, and I'm looking around, and there is all white men at this leaders conference. And so I look around, and the first thing I look at my friend Danielle, and I'm like, are we in the wrong room? Like, is this the wrong room? And the one woman that I saw that came into that room, she was bringing a cup of coffee to the speaker. And I look at that, and man, my heart just broke. And when I saw this, I realized we have a lot of work to do. And so that was one of the points I go back to that even helped myself, carry this burden of women's voices need to be heard in the church, outside of the church. It seems like outside of the church, it's very common. And I am in pain that in the church, women's voices are not used more. So right then I made this decision, let's go on a mission to empower the voices of women. Another thing that I think of that really impacted me when we started our church at Anthem, stepping on the stage and leading with my husband. And what happened was my good friend, she walked up to me and she started weeping and crying. And she said, I never knew that I could lead. I never knew that I could step on a stage, and I saw you do it. And now I know I can. It was almost like chains were just being broken off of her left and right. And she knew that she could. So those are two, sorry, I started with the positive things and just what I realized that were really eye-opening. But also, I mean, you would not believe how much emails and hate mail I get about like women shouldn't lead. I remember one email that I got, and it was pages and pages and pages of, what are you doing?
Oh, you're
You
kidding.
shouldn't lead. I was like, you just got to look at it and keep moving forward.
And we have to talk about this. We have to go there because your makeup, the way you are wired, and let's talk about environmental impact and conditioning. You were raised in a home by a very prominent pastor in the States who said to you, you are affirmed, you go, you are called, I stand behind you. So that male permission, which we didn't need, but as a daughter, right? It was good. And so when you receive those letters that were so cutting, so hurtful, because you were hardwired and already given that push, you just plowed through. But there are women who are listening perhaps now or even later in the pre-recorded, version that are saying, that's the reason I sat down, or that's the reason I didn't move forward, is because of the negativity, the animosity, the visceral anger towards me even wanting to lead. And so I'm so thankful that you push forward, but that's the reason why a lot of women shrink back.
Right. It's so challenging. And with the Women Speakers Collective, I mean, we have women in the room that, feel called to use their voice, and just the pain, like I've wept over it. These women that come, and I remember one specifically, she had a father that said, you could do anything you want. You can use your voice anywhere. And she grew up and she wanted to use her voice, and she knew that she was called to be a pastor. She went back to her dad and said, I know how I'm going to use my voice. And he said, how are you going to do it? And she said, I feel called to be a pastor. And he said, you can use your voice anywhere, but there. You cannot. So you see it. You see these women that are just broken. It's like, man, what do you say? We have to keep moving forward.
Yeah. And that's why I'm so glad to have this conversation. And, you said something about walking into spaces and just seeing a sea of white men and not seeing yourself identified. Just between you and me, can you imagine my world as a visible minority, as a woman that is Black, called to speak? I'm seeing even less of my own in these sort of what we call main stage platforms. And it is, you're right. We have work to do.
We do, but it's being done.
It's being done. And I'm sorry. And that's what we're talking about, how we have moved from this place of being muted to launching these movements. Let me talk to you about this next one. This one's a big question. So we're going to take our time here. Let me lay this up for you. So in October 2019, John Macarthur, one of the most celebrated speakers of our time, celebrated 50 years in the pastorate at a conference at his congregation, Grace Community Church. During the event, Macarthur was asked to give his thoughts about Beth Moore, another prominent female speaker of our time, and other female speakers as well, just female speaking. And his response for her in particular was, quote, "Go home," unquote. This comment went viral and caused an uproar in the Christian community, worldwide. And it really revealed some of the misogyny that unfortunately still exists today. I got a big question for you. We all remember that moment, and I know we've talked about it, and women in the Speakers Collective all sort of had some thoughts and responses, but I want to hear from you. What was going through your mind when you saw all of this play out and the laughter around this go home, Beth Moore? What triggered you about it? Is there anything you want to share?
Yes, there is. My first initial thoughts and reactions was I was angry. Like, how dare you? Like, how dare you tell her to go home? Because if you're telling her to go home, how many other male voices are there telling other females to go home? And so it makes me emotional thinking about it now, because we can't go home. And I loved Beth Moore's response in that. She gave overwhelming, words of love, and, just the grace that she walked with that, and how there was one message that she said, it was a tweet or something, and she said, you know what, we're just going to keep moving. Like, we're going to keep going. And it was almost as if she took it and she just put it behind her. She said, we have to keep moving. But for me, like, it called me to action. It made me want to get up and say, like, you can't go home. Like, let's keep moving. And it propelled me to move forward even more. But also, I was so broken thinking of these, men that are telling women that you don't have a place here. They are missing out on half of God. Like, God created men and women. And if you don't bring women's voices to the table, you are losing a massive part of what he wants to do on the earth. So because of that, my heart began to break for these individuals that think like that, and that speak things like that, and discredit the voices of women. My heart was broken, but it propelled me to action.
And wasn't it amazing to see all of the men just step in and stand up and speak up on behalf of women? It was like we didn't even have a chance to open our mouths. They were like, whoa. It was so empowering to see that side of the kingdom.
Right. And you know what? The more, like, with Women Speakers Collective, we call in men to speak, and we do an interview, and they are just amazing individuals that are saying, we want to open up the door for women. But you know what it is? I think of these men that were sitting in that circle and just started laughing and, making jokes. And what I want to ask them is, like, what about your daughters? What about your granddaughters? What about their voices? And everyone that's been interviewed at the Women Speakers Collective, Reggie Joyner of Orange, we just interviewed him, and he sat there and wept and wept. And he said, my own daughter, I'm thinking of my daughter who's in the room. She has a voice. It needs to be heard. And who am I to say that she cannot speak?
Come on.
So powerful. So powerful.
I love that. Well, I want to stay there. I want to camp there with John Macarthur, because it didn't stop there. It launched just such a great divide, controversy, as we know. But you would think that he would sort of hold back further thoughts, but he didn't. So listen to this. I want to get your thoughts on this. John Macarthur went on further to say in several interviews, this one I pulled from the Christian Post. So I'm quoting from the Christian Post directly. Here's the quote. John Macarthur says that empowering women makes weak men. Let me say that again, because it's unbelievable. Empowering women makes weak men, and weak men makes everybody vulnerable to danger. I'll just say this quote again. John Macarthur states that empowering women makes weak men, and weak men makes everybody vulnerable to danger. As I would say, and as the young people around me would say, is let me just stick this right here. And what are your thoughts about this quote, Autumn, and like, what's your response to all of that? Like, unpack, share honestly.
Yeah. Okay, so empowering women makes weak men. When I think of that, I think of you have it completely flipped around. And I really go to my own husband, who's been so empowering to me as a woman, and affirming my voice and saying, I'm going to get behind you to lead and to use your voice. And I had to write this down. I don't think it shows weakness at all. I think it shows exactly the opposite. I really believe that men who empower women's voices are the strongest men. You know why? Because one, they're thinking not of themselves. Number two, there's no need to feel like they have to dominate in a situation. I feel like they're filled with strength and humility. And when I think of my own husband, man, I look at him and say, he's empowered me to lead. And for him, I look at him and I'm thinking he's the strongest man that I know. To think of Women Speakers Collective may not be in existence if it weren't for a man who said, I release you, even though I didn't need his permission, but he blessed me still. And he said, you go, I'm going to cheer you on. And that humility for me to stand on his shoulders and him to lift me up, that is one of the strongest men that I know. I feel like all others who, and this is just my own personal thoughts, who would say you can't speak or you can't have the stage or you can't use your voice. I only wonder what it is that they need or what it is that they're trying to communicate in pushing women aside. Maybe it's their own place where they feel more secure about themselves. I think that men who release women are some of the most secure men ever, strongest men ever. But honestly, let's go back to the Bible.
Yeah.
Was Jesus a weak man? If I look at a man that empowered women, I look at the life of Jesus. And if we would say that, he was a weak man because he empowered, Mary and Martha. Mary sat there and he said, you are a disciple, in front of other men. She sat at the feet of Jesus. I think of Priscilla and Aquila, they're ones who taught others. Apollo taught him. Was Jesus a weak man for empowering women? No. He was the strongest, most secure. It's let's go back to that. Let's have a conversation around the Bible there.
Yeah, let's do that. Oh, I'm so glad we're having this conversation. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Autumn.
I'm not passionate about this at all.
Not at all. No. Question. I've got another question for you, Autumn. Speaking of passion, what a perfect segue. I know that you have always felt a deep call to help women rediscover their voice. And I always say rediscover because to say discover or find means that it was lost. It was not existent and they had to find it, but it's always been there. It's just been muted. And so you feel this deep call to help women rediscover their voice and affirm their call in speaking. And I'd love to know, where did that come from? You are uber passionate about it. And why is it important for you to see women break through and step into these platforms and spaces?
Right. I think of Esther in scripture, who plays such a key part of my life. In my teenage years, I met Jesus and I gave my life over and I said, man, I want to serve you, God, in any way that I can. And in my teenage years, really, he laid this foundation of identity and calling. And such a huge part of that was the story of Esther. If you don't know Esther, she, the Jews were about to be completely annihilated. And Mordecai came to her and said, she was a queen at the time, said, you've been placed in this time for such a time as this. You've been placed in this palace with these people, and you need to go to the king on behalf of your people, and you need to raise your voice. You need to be brave. You need to step through those doors, even though you are not allowed to. And you know what she did? She was brave. She hung on to Jesus, and she fasted and she prayed and she walked through the doors of that beautiful throne room. And she went before the king and she asked for mercy for her people. And mercy came and deliverance came to an entire people group because she was brave to use her voice. So when I think of that, I think of how many women out there, how many men, but let's talk about women. How many women out there feel called to use their voice, but they're being held by the chains of fear. They're too concerned about what's going to happen if I raise my voice on behalf of this. What are people going to say about it? And I saw too many voices and I had too many conversations with women who said, I can't for this reason, this reason, and this reason. And my heart began to break because the truth is they've been placed on this earth. You've been placed on this earth for such a time as this. And Cheryl, if we miss it, we got one chance.
Yeah.
We've got one chance. And the urgency of that has gripped my heart to help as many women as I can
Yeah.
step into their calling, face their fears head on and actually
Yeah.
take a step into
So
the
good.
reality of what that dream looks like and what their
So good.
calling is. So I'm
Yeah.
passionate about it because we only have one chance and we're here for such a time as this. And
Yeah.
that puts like urgency in me. I got one shot. I don't know how many days I have left. I'm
Yeah.
going to use my life for the good.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Mhm.
And like for the person that's called, we just encourage them to be obedient to God's voice and
That's
not
right.
worry and not fear man's opinions and thoughts. But really, if you know that this is what God has called you to do, then you need to walk in that thing, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
good.
right.
Oh man. Okay, so I gotta ask you, what's your hope? What's your hope for the church, especially when it comes to female leadership? I'd love to know, like, let's look into the future. Let's think
Right.
about the next generation. What's your hope for the next generation of women? And what's your hope for the church?
Yes. Well, let's go back to I have a 5-year-old daughter. And I don't want, and again, it makes me emotional. I don't want my daughter to live in the same world that says women don't have a place to speak, especially in the church, or women's voices. My little girl, Aria, your voice is not valuable. What you have to say cannot be brought to the table. And so
Right.
when I envision the future, I envision my daughter having a voice, not having to battle or even question, do I not, can I not? But she stands confident wherever she's called to use her voice. And she knows that she has permission and
Yeah.
she has, the right to use her voice and she can, and she's confident in that. When I think of the future of the church, I think of equality. I think of men and women leading together. I think of women not having to think, me sitting at the table, will anybody listen to me because I'm a female? But they're sitting there in confidence saying, I know they'll all listen to me because times have changed and
Mm,
things are different now. So when I look into the future of the church specifically, it's men and women leading together, where men especially, they know the value of the voice of women. They know it. They've heard it. They've seen it. And there's no question in their mind that they have to play a part. We're going to miss out on so much if we don't let women at the table.
oh, this is such a good conversation. And so, you said something, and for some reason, I'm just really internalizing it and putting my own spin on it as a Black woman. Like, this is not a debate anymore. I don't have to debate my humanity to anybody. I don't have to debate my equality to anybody. I am equal. I am human. Like this, even this push to like my life matters is so insulting because I shouldn't even have to say it. It's obvious that my life matters. But yet here we are pushing and advancing and having to remind the world. And so this is the same thing with women. Like this never ending argument of we have a voice, we have a voice, we have a voice. It almost seems like, why are we even having, of course we have a voice. Of course God has called us. And of course God can give gifts to whomever he desires to give gifts to and callings to whomever it's his will, not ours.
Right. That is
Right?
totally right. And I think for every woman that listens to this and she's questioning, like, do I have a voice? And waiting for the validation of somebody else. Maybe it's her husband, maybe it's a church leader, and maybe somebody. I mean, I'm all about calling you out and saying, hey, rise up. You have a voice. You got something to do. Don't be afraid anymore. If you're afraid, let's conquer those fears. But I think every woman, even listening to this now, needs to voice herself out loud so her own ears can hear and say, I have a voice.
Come on.
I have something to say. I'm not staying silent. So like we need to encourage ourselves and speak this out. We need to write it on our mirrors, write it on our refrigerators, write it in our car. I have a voice. So
I want you to keep going because there's more initiatives, but just let the listeners know where you've had some of these women speaker collective gatherings, because they've been literally all over the world.
Yes, we started in Long Beach. We went to Toronto. We've been in Chicago. We've been in the UK. We're headed to South Africa. We are going to Canada. We've got people in New Zealand. I mean, it's going everywhere. Honduras is asking us to come. I mean,
Wow.
see, the Philippines have invited us to come.
Come on.
Had them all over the place. New York City, we were there right before everything shut down, and man,
So good.
yeah, everywhere.
Autumn, I'm so thankful. I just want to close off with a couple of things. One that's really fun, but first, for anyone that was listening, that this talk of stepping forward, launching forward, being brave, doing the thing that God's called you to do. If it's resonated for them, how can they become a part of Women's Speaker Collective and any other information?
You can follow me at Autumn Katz, Katz. And then Women's Speakers Collective, you go to our website. And also Danielle Strickland, she's going to have a lot of things on there as well. Our Instagram, Women's Speakers Collective, you'll find information there. But we are getting ready to book and announce our 2021 dates. It's been a little tricky navigating through these times with all that's going on in our world. But we're going to be doing a ton of online trainings. And so if anything, there's going to be training there. But we're looking forward to our live boot camps starting up again next year. We're going to do a lot of regional ones. We have some phenomenal female speakers called our profile speakers, and they're going to be taking some of the lead to do these boot camps in different regions all over the globe.
And I want to just not to toot, but
you're amazing, Cheryl, and you are one of our coaches and speakers. Sorry, I interrupted you. I had to.
I wasn't saying it for that. I just want to say
we can't do it without you.
For those that follow me and appreciate my teaching and my preaching style, I'll be one of the coaches. That's what I want to say.
Yes, you will.
Okay, so we've come to the part that I love. This is just a little impromptu moment. It's called Finish This Sentence. Okay, and I've got 3 for you. Nice and short and sweet. So, Autumn, I want to ask you to finish this sentence. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. It is time for those of faith to what?
To use their voice without fear.
Ooh, girl, say that again one more time. You better shout it out.
I'll shout it out. It's time for those of faith, especially women, to use their voice without fear.
Oh, amen to that. Oh, yeah. Here's the second one for you. So we talked about what it's time for. What is it not time for?
Well, considering the conversation, it's not time for women to wait for permission.
Well, okay, then. It's not time for women to wait for permission, right?
They have permission to use.
They have permission. It's been given to them by God.
It had.
To that. Here's the last one for you, and you've done so great. Change will not happen unless.
Yeah, change won't happen unless we face our fears and step into our God-given calling. We all play a part, and we have to face the fear. That's the number one thing that in coaching individuals that I find keeps them from stepping into their calling is they are afraid of blank. For whatever reason, maybe something that happened to them when they were young, maybe something that somebody said to them and they've held on to it for so long and it's held them back from stepping into that big dream, that God-sized dream. So the number one thing, you got to face that fear head on. My kids know that mom does something every day that scares her. They'll even ask me, I've got 4 kiddos, 3 boys and a girl. And they'll say, Mom, what'd you do today that scared you? And I choose to live my life like that, to live my life breaking through that fear and continuing to press forward. It will not hold us back. It can't hold us back any longer.
Fear will not and will no longer hold us back. I just want anyone listening to repeat after me. Fear will no longer hold me back. Yeah, I will do the thing that God has called me to do. Oh, my goodness. Autumn Katz, I am so thankful for you. And before you go, because you are just a vessel that constantly pours in, I just want to give you a moment in case there's any last encouraging word for the young girl, for the old woman who has been silent for so long, anything to close us off.
Yeah. I think the one thing that I want to say to you is, again, you have a voice and let's seize the moment. Let's seize the moment. I want to encourage you to stand confident in your call. Confidence is something that us as women, it gets shaken a lot. And honestly, my confidence is found in my faith. It's founded in God alone. That is where I found my security and my identity. First of all, knowing that God calls me his own. That's where my security is found. And in that, I know he has a mission for me here. And so I want to encourage you to find your security, break through those fears, but find that confidence and find that in God. Find it in God. But use your voice. Don't hold back. It is your time.
Whew. And the church said, amen. Autumn, thank you so much for joining me on the path.
Thanks for having
It
me.
has been amazing. I'm so thankful for you.
See you.